Whoa, welcome into episode 4 of the Negative Space podcast. That's right, 4 episodes in. I thought this might just be like, I might get like 2 and just be exhausted by it. But you know what? I keep on going. I'm having fun with this. It's been like 1 a week and it's a new month. So that means basically every week in January I recorded something. Taxes are coming up. I just remembered I need to get 1099s from some people and just money in general from some people that owe me it. I think I'm gonna send them some people mafia style. But that's beside the point. Today we are talking about psychological operations. Now, I have been the victim of one recently. I promise I will get to how right now. So if you follow the Instagram, at negativespace.pod, by the way, go follow it. I know nobody who doesn't follow the Instagram listens to this show, I think. Anyway, whatever. I don't care. I'm drinking my Aldi brand Bellevue sparkling water thing here. I consider myself a sparkling water connoisseur. I go through quite a few in a day. Anyway, if you follow the Instagram, you have seen my struggles that I've been posting on my story with these just horrendous amount of ads for dating apps, and particularly really niche ones. So basically Instagram thinks I'm a gay autistic Muslim because I've gotten Instagram dating ads for Muslims, gays, autistic people, metal listeners, introverts, foodies, and then I even got one for like the 4-letter personality types, which okay, whatever, I don't care, alongside a bunch of other ones. Stop giving me, I don't know why. Stop it. No one I follow, I think, would be creating this in the algorithm. I have personalized ads turned off. Stop it, Instagram, please. I thought that until, wait a minute. Okay, there are three possibilities here. 1, someone I follow is interacting with that type of content, whatever is causing that to be on my feed. Okay, if that's it, then whatever, so be it. Another is Instagram somehow knows that I'm recording a conspiracy theory podcast out of my closet in Los Angeles, and it's like, yeah, this dude needs to get out more, and they're trying to do a bro move. I'm anonymous on there, so they don't really know who I am, and they're just trying to throw the spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. The third one, which is what I'm going to ironically believe is the truth because it's funny, is that the Rothschilds and Zuckerberg and whoever else, the World Economic Forum, they're teaming up to target me with these ads so I get distracted and don't get close to the truth of what they're really up to. Now, that's not it at all, but I wanna say it because I think it's funny. It's like the meme, falling in love. It's different when you know they're an agent sent by the federal government to distract you. That just a psyop, because that is what today's episode is about: psychological operations. Ignore the crusty world of dating apps. They're just bad, and their algorithms are messed up, and they reinforce just stupid ideas within people. Now, okay, enough about me rambling about those things. Let's talk about psychological operations. I went over them briefly in a previous episode. I think episode 2? Either the first one or the second one. I don't remember. Either way, let's sort of refresh. Let's get some background information and talk about the 4 pillars of a good psyop. These come from GoArmy.com, their psychological operations unit. I guess unit, because whatever. These are the 4 pillars of what makes a good psyop. 1, influence with information. Military information support operations. Gosh, some of these acronyms are just hard to say. Those missions involve sharing specific information to foreign audiences to influence the emotions, motives, reasoning, and behavior of foreign governments and citizens. This can include cyber warfare and advanced communication techniques across all forms of media. 2, deliberately deceive. Military deception missions use psychological warfare to deliberately mislead enemy forces during a combat situation. 3. Advise governments. Interagency and government support missions shape and influence foreign decision-making and behaviors in support of United States objectives. 4. Provide communication for rescue efforts. Civil authorities information support. Missions aid civilian populations during disaster relief situations, whatever. Now, I will probably come at some of these with a rather neutral perspective, at least the first few, because they're probably the lesser of two evils, and I'm not gonna sit here and postulate and be some moral judge. The only thing that I am a judge of is that this sparkling water is good, and Aldi should sponsor me. All right. Now, as I'm speaking, I'm remembering that there is another PSYOP that happened on U.S. soil conducted by a 3-letter organization that I forgot to write down here. So hopefully I remember it when I get to that point. But it's very interesting and part of a whole different series of events that was just crazy and unfortunate. So now I will reiterate some background information from the episode where I mentioned this. I think it was episode 1. So we can all be on the same page to know how we got to this point. So Edward Lansdale, kind of the father of the psychological operation, if you will. He was a former marketing bigwig in San Francisco. He joined the Army during World War II and eventually got recruited to join the OSS, which was a precursor to the CIA. So he kind of did the first real PSYOP ever. And it was overseas. It was in the Philippines. And I will try to skip over some of the boring political history stuff, but some of it helps set the stage. Also, as always, this podcast is going to be generally lighthearted. A big stamp of allegedly over everything, because I could be wrong, and also I don't want to be held responsible for slander or libel, whatever. And some of these things, they kind of suck. They're kind of messed up. But as my 8th grade social studies teacher taught me, time plus strategy equals humor. And I think that is exactly right. So, post-war Japan. It was kind of the Wild West, or I guess the Wild East. Either way, they were having trouble after getting atom bombed. And it really didn't help that there was a rebellion brewing in the Philippines. So the Hukbalahap Rebellion, I think that's how it's said, the Hukbalahap Rebellion, that is a name that is a derivation from a different name that means the People's Army Against Japan in English. It was a growing militia that was trying to free themselves from the Japanese government. Long story short, over time, they kind of became communist sympathizers, and if it's red, it's better off dead. So, we weren't too sure how to handle them. They were more of a guerrilla group, and we were fighting on their turf, and that's difficult for a bunch of reasons. Until the aforementioned Edward Lansdale had an idea. He kind of flipped their whole home turf advantage on its ear. He wrote, "My orders were plain. The United States government wanted me to give all help feasible to the Philippine government in stopping the attempt by the communist-led hooks to overthrow that government by force. My help was to consist mainly of advice where needed and desired. It was up to me to figure out how best to do this. Conventional military men think of combat Psy-war almost exclusively in terms of leaflets or broadcasts appealing to the enemy to surrender," he continued. "Early on, I realized that Psy-war had a wider potential than that." So the people of the Huk Rebellion, and I guess just kind of the Filipino people at the time in general, were, if not still are, very superstitious. They had many legends of different cryptids and paranormal creatures alongside other cultural taboos, and Lansdale did his market research to understand some of the pressure points when it came to this. So his first effective move, all these really kind of are messed up, but they worked. His first effective move was to, on cloudy days, whenever visibility of the sky was low, to fly in light aircraft above hook apologist areas, and he would shout curses through a megaphone down onto the people below. So he would, of course, use their original language, and that scared many sympathizers into either surrendering or just cutting off ties with the hooks. They thought that like some celestial being was shouting down curses onto them for being hook sympathizers. Another strategy of his was called the Eye of God tactic. So he would have large eyes painted outside the homes of suspected hook allies as a way to quote-unquote mark them as the quote-unquote next to die. So this is kind of a twist on a tactic used in World War II, where on the battlefield the names of German officers were called out through loudspeakers to kind of mark them as the next to die if they didn't surrender. And surprise, surprise, this was also very effective. But it gets way better. It gets way more messed up too. Oh my gosh. Okay, so they have a legend of a creature called the Aswang. I think that's how it's pronounced. In English, its name is the bringer of awful things, which it's bad if it's that vague that you can attribute any bad thing to it. So this creature is kind of like a vampire, but can also take on the form of a giant pig, a dog, or even a man-sized vulture. These descriptions, they're kind of funny. And given that it's said to just feed on human carcasses and organs. So like on several occasions they saw a vulture, pig, or dog eat a part of a human corpse, which they do anyways if they don't have other food. So like, okay, sudden illnesses or deaths and those types of things were often attributed to the Aswang. Once the Spanish started coming to the Philippines, a Spanish friar attributed it all to demons, which I guess, and that's where the ideas of it becoming more vampiric in nature really started to take off. So legend goes that it targets particularly vulnerable individuals like pregnant women and children, and particularly unborn children. So next time you see a Planned Parenthood, maybe you know what's going on there. Oh my gosh, that was dark. Why did I say that? But basically, it would try to consume people's insides, particularly the insides of pregnant women. It would try to eat the fetus, which is really gross. It's really dark. And the U.S. government said, yep, that thing. That's what we're going to mimic. So, anyway, if you're curious about more of this stuff, there's a website called the aswangproject.org, which has a lot of more information on the cryptid from an actual Filipino perspective. But now this is where the army comes in. So the hook had set up on top of a hill by a village, and then threatened violence against anybody really who didn't comply. Basically, they're violating the Third Amendment, and this was back when the U.S. seemingly thought it was important to enforce the Constitution overseas and at home, but now they don't care about it either in either places. Lansdale's orders to his combat Psywar squad were to first start spreading rumors that the Aswang was on the hunt again to the people in this little hill village. And then, well, we'll just read off Lansdale's words himself. The Psywar squad set up an ambush along the trail used by the hooks. When a hook patrol came along the trail, the ambushers silently snatched the last man of the patrol, their move unseen in the dark night. They punctured his neck with 2 holes, vampire fashion, held the body up by the heels, drained it of blood, and put the corpse back on the trail. When the hooks returned to look for the missing man and found the bloodless comrade, every member of the patrol believed the Aswang had gotten him, and that one of them would be next if they remained on that hill. When daylight came, the whole hook squadron moved out of the vicinity. Apologies for not reading that very smoothly. Oh, see, you're getting the genuine me every time. So now the thing to remember with this is that we don't exactly know if the hook actually thought it was the Aswang, because it was more said to eat unborn children than it was to suck blood out of people. So we didn't really know if they thought it was that or if they saw the result of an attack and just assumed the CIA to be like ruthlessly insane Either way, they got out of there in a jiff. So that was kind of the first real big one, the first real psyop that the government ever conducted. But unfortunately, not all of them. Unfortunately, I don't know. Not all of them were as successful as numero uno. That brings us to another overseas psyop during this whole Cold War type era that just didn't work when we got our collective took-us whooped in guerrilla warfare by the Vietnamese. Our involvement there was questionable at best to begin with, and we will get to why that is and how that was also a psyop. So much like the Filipino people, the Vietnamese and they had and maybe still have a lot of superstitious beliefs about the dead, burial rituals, and the like. So of course we had to take advantage of that. If one is not given a proper burial in their homeland, they can become a wandering soul in Vietnamese legend. So I think you can see where this is going. The U.S. government, it decided to bring South Vietnam soldiers in to record audio that sounded like Viet Cong soldiers who had died in combat so they could play it out of loudspeakers from helicopters at night in the jungle. And they often included other eerie sounds as well to really sell it. This prevented the Viet Cong from resting during the night. But in all reality, they really just seemed more annoyed than scared. Again, for the most part, the results were kind of mixed. Sometimes it worked out, but when they started to know that it was a recording, they would just shoot in the general direction of the sound. That was actually effective to an extent, though, because it revealed their position if they're hidden. Now, the Army still claims it as a success, even though it didn't really do what they expected it to do. Like, they still found hidden locations of Viet Cong soldiers, but it didn't drive them out from that location. So, anyway, that just being one of their weaker attempts overseas at this whole shebang. Imagine you're a federal government with decades to perfect this craft. What if maybe you wanted to perform this on your own population? They would never do that, right? Oh, yes, they would. They absolutely would. So have you heard of a little something called Operation Northwoods? Oh, boy. No? Great. Let's talk about Operation Northwoods. As far as I can tell, this was sort of the start of the government considering false flag operations on their own people, which is really messed up. That is more messed up than doing that in a foreign country, because you're doing it to your own people who trust you. So anyway, false flags and psyops go very hand in hand, as psyops are kind of like the psychological result of a false flag. So a false flag is an event where, say, a government commits a terrorist attack on its own people, then pins it on another country in order to justify taking action there in the eyes of their own people. You know, the eyes of the public, they're very important. The public perception, that is everything when it comes to a lot of these military actions. But false flags are all about sort of disguising the source of the real attack. I hope that illustrates how these things are so closely related. So back to Operation Northwoods. This was taking place during the events of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the 60s, the Cold War. So obviously tensions between the United States and all the different communist-aligned countries were very, very high. So on March 13th of 1962, the Joint Chiefs of Staff presented documents titled Justification for U.S. Military Intervention in Cuba. The code name for it was Operation Northwoods. So Northwoods was a plan proposed to commit false flag terrorist attacks on U.S. citizens in large cities and then claim the Cubans were responsible for it. So it proposed the sinking of boats with Cuban refugees on it, blowing up different U.S. ships, hijacking planes, and other wholesome activities. From there, it would give them all the justification that they needed to get involved with Cuba directly, because the public would have been riled up about this. Public support would have been at an all-time high. And again, public perception is everything. Now, these never actually took place, thankfully, because JFK rejected them, but that's also probably why he got whacked, or at least one of the many reasons why he got whacked. The CIA definitely did it. I think I'm deep enough into this podcast where I can say that and not get in trouble with anyone. But yeah, the CIA definitely did it. A few years later in the government, in the 60s, I should say, the government decided that another false flag operation was in order. Now, this one was a little different, but still ended up giving more power to those in charge than they deserved. So the official story is that on August 2nd of 1964, the USS Maddox, a destroyer-class ship, was in the Gulf of Tonkin performing signal intelligence. Signet, as it's also referred to, is the act of intercepting signals, whether electronic or direct communication. So then 3 North Vietnamese torpedo boats started to pursue the Maddox, in which it fired, the Maddox, I should say, fired 3 warning shots in return. The North Vietnamese boats responded with torpedoes and different artillery like machine gun fire. This ended poorly for the Vietnamese, but no U.S. sailors were hurt, thankfully. On the 4th, 2 days later, the Maddox and destroyer-class Turner Joy were again under attack by North Vietnamese torpedo boats. President Lyndon B. Johnson would make a public address on the subject and said that military retaliation was in order. Congress would then pass the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, which granted Johnson the authority to, and I quote, take all necessary steps, including the use of armed force, to assist any member or protocol state of the Southeast Asia Collective Defense treated requesting assistance in the defense of its freedom. I think I might have mistyped something in there. Oh well, you get the gist of it. They're giving him power to send whatever to South Vietnam to fight the Viet Cong. Like I said, our involvement in Vietnam kind of started out as questionable at best. So that was Johnson's justification to further send more U.S. forces overseas and officially begin the war in Vietnam. Now, many years later, in 2005, an NSA historian, Robert J. Hanyuk, claimed that the NSA deliberately distorted signal intelligence reports given to Congress and other policymakers in reference to what happened on the 4th of August. He says that the attacks on the 2nd did happen, but under questionable circumstances, and that the attacks on the 4th never actually happened. The U.S. Naval Institute, they also have a great article on the topic, proving that there was no second attack. Apparently, there's some people who genuinely believe that there was, and there was a storm that night, so maybe some people on board actually thought that a lightning strike or whatever was like some artillery being shot towards them, whatever, something along those lines. But the NSA had direct involvement in distorting signals that would have otherwise proven nothing, but here made the entire public think that North Vietnam, the Viet Cong, were attacking our boats. That just wasn't happening. So what we get here is an otherwise uninformed population being convinced that military action is justified because the NSA distorted those signals and lied about a set of attacks in North Vietnam. That resulted in more power for the president at the time. Cool. The Naval Institute article itself has a great conclusion that the system of checks and balances, which are crucial to the foundation of our government, were just completely ignored by signing that law into effect. Lyndon B. Johnson had way too much power to just send whatever he wanted over there. That was ridiculous. It's actually a really good song that I like. I mean, really good is subjective, whatever. by a band called Silverstein about the Vietnam draft, which puts things in a really interesting perspective. Just kind of because, let's see, the guy who wrote it, it was like he was born in the generation after, so he's like, wow, this could have just as easily happened to me. And like these people, they're basically owned by the government and had no say in it. It's really really fascinating perspective on Vietnam. But anyway, back on the topic at hand. Surely a more informed population would be easier to spot some of these things, right? No. Seeing them for what they were, 60 years ago is cool and all, but with the more information that we have, I think the easier it can be sometimes to really, really poison the well. Part of the trickiness of pointing out what a psyop is and what they could be doing is that it's like playing 6D chess, but you're always a move behind. It's also kind of like trying to figure out moral relativism in a way. I hope that makes sense when I illustrate this a little clearer. So with so much information available at our fingertips, it's really easy to poison the well and discredit a lot of truth. As always, the most dangerous lie has a hint of truth in it, because humans, we are very good at taking a little bit of truth and extrapolating it as a total justification to cover for the rest of the lie, even if we're just completely unaware that the rest of it is a lie. So I hope this illustration helps if that didn't make any sense at all. So this podcast is a conspiracy theory / weird theology / question reality type of show. I am not a federal agent, and I do all the writing myself. However, if someone thought that this whole podcast was a psyop, this is what they might say. That I really am a federal agent, and me saying it, saying I'm not is sort of like ironic reverse psychology. It's like, he's not a federal agent. Of course he wouldn't be. The information I'm distilling into this has been heavily edited to enforce a certain worldview or perspective. That would be point number 2 that they would make. The third point would be that there is a little bit of truth in everything, but not enough to give you the full story, to either deceive the listener or to discredit the theories themselves. The fourth point would be that I want you to question the government or certain agencies like the CIA or NSA as a distraction, or so that it takes heat off of other agencies that might be performing more in-depth, heinous actions. So like if I say, oh, hey, the CIA did this, it would be to distract you from the FBI doing this. If I said, oh, hey, the CIA definitely killed JFK, and they're like, okay, yeah, whatever, what are you going to do about it? It would distract you from the FBI assassinating MLK. The fifth point would be is that the relatively low production quality is there to keep your guard down, to make you feel safer when I say these things, like I'm not really trying to mess with your brain. Now, I think that gets a point across. I hope it does. But, just in general, psyops can be really hard to get a handle on. Even when some connection seems obvious, it could be that they're strategically showing their hand. A little obvious sleight of hand to get one person going one way, and then it's the old bait and switch, and they go the other. So this is something. It's funny because it can go all the way from just the U.S. government in general to the Epstein people, to the World Economic Forum, to the Rothschilds and Rockefellers, to an enigmatic organization like the Illuminati or something like that. Now, personally, I think some symbolism is absolutely intentional for recognition purposes. Like they get a little thrill out of branding themselves a little bit. So, for example, the swirl that is often associated with pedophiles and the Epstein type individuals. I think that the use of the swirl goes back to a serial pedophile online who became known as Mr. Swirl. He would warp his face with the Photoshop Liquify Swirl tool to conceal his identity when he would share photos of him with different children that he would abuse. until the police figured out that they could just like swirl it in the opposite direction and see what he looked like. Either way, the swirl is like it's a big time symbol for pedophiles. It's in a lot of places you don't realize. Anyway, there's also like the pyramid and the all-seeing eye, ancient Egypt and the modern world. Oh, where have I heard that before? Oh, yeah, the second episode of this podcast. And the third one, as a matter of fact. The pyramids themselves were actually not only tombs, but also seen as dwelling places for the Egyptian gods, for just gods in general, because the ancient person often associated or envisioned their gods living in either a mountain where humans can't go, like they're protected everywhere, or a garden, where there's no want for or need for food because it's all there. Anyway, I can feel myself getting off track here again, getting on a tangent, but that's the whole reason I started this podcast. Are there any modern psyops that we can actually point towards? Yes, and some of them are very messed up. I got a few listed here. Let's see. I've got 3, including a real big one that kind of frightens me. And if you're really curious about it, I will link some resources to read more into it. But holy cow, the only reason I can still think that it's available to read is because you can easily say like, oh, hey, anyone who believes that is crazy. They're conspiracy theorists. Which, by the way, actually, another psyop. The term conspiracy theorist was invented by the CIA to discredit people who question the truth that they would purport. Let's say someone, I don't know, maybe back in the 60s said, no, there were not 2 attacks on the USS Maddox. There was only one, and you are doing this so you can overreach power and send more troops to Vietnam when we shouldn't be doing that. They would get called a conspiracy theorist by the CIA so they could say, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's just a crazy person. See, this is why psyops are like the basis for every conspiracy theory, because it's all about overthinking your opponent. In reality, some of the time, I don't think the CIA is really that smart, but also I think there is a lot of credence you can give to some of these ideas. Another sip of my wonderful Aldi brand Belvi sparkling water. Lemon flavored. Aldi, sponsor me. Okay, so first one I want to talk about, as I remember the other one that I didn't write down but is still interesting to talk about that I will, identity politics. So I genuinely believe that at least part of this is purposeful, planned philosophy that was always meant to poison the mind of the average individual. Humans, I think, we naturally want to tie our identity to something, especially when you're young, like middle school, high school age. Like you're trying to find who you are, what you're like, what you like, and you oftentimes end up associating your identity with something else. Now, that's really effective if you can get them started on that young. And for the longest time, it seemed like simply being an American was good enough and strong enough to serve as that ideal that you tie your identity to. That means, the values of freedom, the American creed, biblical ethic, etc. Now, somewhere along the line, we got too absorbed with identifying left versus right. Now, it's splintered beyond that to subsections of political ideology alongside gender madness and all of those shenanigans, all of that gobbledygook. But why is this a psyop? Because it has a lot of potential to rile people up, to incite violence, to create sort of an us versus them environment. And you don't have to run false flag campaigns if someone else does it for you. Especially if it happens, maybe every 4 years. I don't know. That definitely is. Yes, it absolutely is happening. Every time that there has been a presidential election, like the last 3 cycles, there's been something crazy that's gone wrong that has influenced the mind of the people voting to say, hey, maybe I should give up a little bit more of my freedoms to stop these crazy people that I don't like from doing these things. Like, I don't know, driving a Dodge Challenger through a protest in Nashville. I think that's where it happened. Anyway, that sort of brings us to the actions of the DNC. They've done a lot of that. Now, I know the RNC, they're no angels. Believe me, I've got firsthand experience with that I won't get into. But over time, they've had a lot of scandals. Like I said, every 4 years, it's been like everything that they accuse the right of doing, they end up doing themselves. It's a very odd pattern. So things like voter fraud, inciting violence, stealing elections, etc., that sort of thing. But why is that a psyop? Because if you're first to the accusation, it makes it so much harder to have it thrown back at you. It's like picking up, or it's like having like a snowball in your hand, and you throw it at someone else, and it's like them trying to take the same snowball that you threw at them, all the little clumps of snow, get it back together, and then throw it back. Like, it's just not going to be as big. It's not going to mean as much. So it's kind of like a win-win for them, really, because you're either going to have your dogmatic boomer voter base that like sees your whole party as, we're fighting for the little guy, and we're definitely not taking advantage of minorities, which they are. They're gonna have, they're gonna see you as like angels and perfect and sweet, people looking out for the little guy. Or, you're gonna have, again, the rightfully throwing it back, saying, hey, whatever you're accusing us of doing, you're actually doing. And it's not going to mean anything. This is not going to mean anything. So people are either going to love you, or they're just going to end up saying, look at these jabronis accusing you of the same thing. Have they never had an original idea? It's really a win-win. Now, another one that I just thought of was, if you know about the incident in Waco with the Branch Davidians, that is one beast of a topic. Has a really good video on it, and it's actually inspired a lot. Basically, why I do this is Wendigoon on YouTube. It's like the Wendigo, but Goon. He has a great video about the whole Waco event where the FBI kind of overstepped its bounds. But what they would do is inside the headquarters of the Branch Davidians, which, say what you want about their theology, whatever, I think that there were probably some lies spread about them abusing children. I don't know for sure, but from all accounts, they were still very nice people, and they were like, it seemed like they were genuinely trying to understand scripture, and kind of broke off into their own little division, whatever. When the FBI was kind of, pestering them and trying to get them to become violent, what they would do is at night, even though they denied these allegations, despite having clear video evidence of it, at night, so they couldn't sleep and would become, more prone to violence and less patient, they would shine high-vis flashlights into the windows of their headquarters building, and then play loud dolphin sounds and other weird animal sounds for some reason. Like, it was really messed up. So no wonder that whole situation ended as horribly as it did. Honestly, they were just trying to distract everyone from the events at Ruby Ridge where they shot a kid and his dog. That's another whole big thing that I'm sure I'll get to talk about at some point. But yeah, that was like it's like a big time mainstream psychological operation at work. Like, they were really trying to mess with the heads of these people. Now, not to the full extent of like planting false information in there and like saying whatever. The psyop, I guess, was more on the American people about what the Branch Davidians were really doing. Unfortunately, a lot of people died in that situation. It wasn't great. The FBI really biffed that one. But anyway, on to the next one, the one that kind of scares me. Now, I posted a photo of this on my Instagram story. Again, follow at negativespace.pod if you are a listener on YouTube and want to keep up with me and the happenings of this show. But this is kind of the biggest one that I can think of: Project Bluebeam and the Toronto Protocol. So you got Sergei Monast, I don't know. He's a French-Canadian journalist, or was a French-Canadian journalist. He published, or I guess he leaked documents titled Project Bluebeam, parentheses, NASA. This was in 1994. So it details his findings of a plan by NASA using technology like HARP, High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, which is like this big satellite that they have in Alaska that has all sorts of crazy technological capabilities, and it can probably control the weather. Anyway, to digitally recreate the second coming of Jesus Christ in the sky. Okay, right off the bat, that sounds absolutely insane. But I mean, as an eschatology guy myself, I'm like, I mean, I kind of believe it. So the goal of this is to use the false Christ to destroy traditional religions into one sort of like alien New Age spiritualist amalgamation that promotes a worldwide singular government. You can even find transcriptions of his work. I will link that in the description. And he even goes further into this and how it will actually work with the Toronto Protocol. More documents that he leaked, which I will also link here. That is actually free to read on Google Books if you just look that up too. So if you ask, well, why would they do that? What's the point of that? So this would be his reply. He wrote this as in part of his transcript. To abolish all Christian traditional religions in order to replace them by a one world religion based on the cult of man. To abolish all national identity and national pride in order to establish a world identity and world pride. Maybe see like illegal immigration being rampant and open borders and all that, and like all the stuff happening in both the US and the UK where like immigrants are coming in illegally and like destroying the cultures of the people there, whatever, that's all fun. To abolish the family as known today in order to replace it by individuals all working for the glory of one world government. Again, we've seen the erosion of the nuclear family over time and the generational family. Actually, I think in my opinion, like the nuclear family is great. It's great, but I think the generational family is probably a step ahead where like grandparents are involved too. So like it makes it easier to watch children and all that sort of stuff. Like that, I just think that kind of seems better, but both are great. Just a family unit in general is great, and we've had that eroded. We've had that eroded through feminism, for example. That has been a disaster for the nuclear family, as well as just anti-family values and sentiment being propagated throughout media, television, movies, whatever, predictive programming type stuff. Then another point of his would be to destroy all individual artistic and scientific creating works to implement a world government's one mind sight. So it's really all about creating a large amalgamation where everybody is one. It's kind of like a transcendentalist idea, kind of, where we're all connected to like one ethereal knowledge being, and like we're all got like for illustration purposes, like some invisible tube connected to some big giant invisible eye in the sky that we can't see. I think, if I remember correctly, that's kind of what the transcendentalists were on about. But anyway, he continues by saying the tools of the new world government are a multinational army, an international police force, a world bank for the economy, a world government under the United Nations, a world conservation bank for wilderness around the world. That means all green movements will be melded into this new international bank or will disappear. A world religion where all church doctrines will be destroyed at the roots to replaced by the new religion of the age of Aquarius. Now that makes me think, well, what if Jesus was right and there really will be signs in the stars? Because, Aquarius is part of the zodiac, which came from Babylon, and Babylon is a big revelation symbol, and all that great stuff, and like impure mixtures being like a common theme in the law, which makes sense that it would be a common theme in sort of the end of time, where everything is a big who do you worship issue, that sort of thing. That is just actually, eschatology is really where I kind of started getting involved in this. Like, I know ultimately eschatology doesn't matter that much, because things are just going to play out how they play out. And if we stick too rigidly to one interpretation, that could completely dampen your faith. Honestly, I think prophecy is a little malleable. Future prophecy, that is. Like, I think there are multiple signs are fulfilled in multiple ways in order for different people across time to understand what's going on. You even kind of get this with some of the signs being repeated in quick succession. That's a whole thing. I could go into how, actually, while we're on the topic of signs in the stars, one of the examples of that is the passage where it's about the dragon trying to devour the man child that the woman is giving birth to. Now, I interpret that just as kind of like, well, the woman I personally interpret as like Israel, and that is they're giving birth to Christ being the man child to rule with an iron rod, whatever. The dragon seeking to devour it. Herod tried to kill him before he, whatever. That's one interpretation. Then another interpretation that is really freaking cool, and it overlaps well, and I think it is evidence in favor of my position of prophecy being repeated in different ways, is that these signs also happened in the stars. That would have created the star that the wise kings followed. So you've got the magi that is, they tracked the movements of the stars, and it's funny, they actually hated the Pharisees because they thought they were too liberal with their calendar usage. The stars, there was the dragon that overlapped with the woman. I can't remember what symbols those would have been, but it would have been relatively close to, if not exactly on the historical date we can track Jesus's birth to, which aligns with when the Passover lambs would have been born, which has other theological significance. Anyway, I'm getting off track because I like eschatology, and this is sort of an eschatological subject. I didn't mean for this episode to get theological again, but here we are. It all kind of comes back to this for me. But anyway, this all sounds very alien in nature. A digital recreation of the creation. I guess not recreation, because the second coming hasn't happened yet. Digital creation of the second coming, just kind of convince everyone to join this one union of world governments colliding, all that sort of stuff. Now, I actually think that Ancient Aliens in its own right is kind of a psyop in itself, because let's say everyone does interpret that it's like a whole alien event, and there are some cults that say, oh, Jesus was an alien and all that sort of garbage. It's so present in the mind of a lot of people that they'd be like, wow, that crazy guy with the big hair who always said aliens was right about all this. It was aliens. Aliens did build the pyramids in Egypt. That sort of thing. I think that's actually psyop, and maybe Zechariah Sitchin was a deep state agent, or he was just being used. Now, this is another interesting thing that has eschatological implications of its own. Monset, the guy who leaked these documents, in his earlier years, he was an active member of the Canadian Social Credit Party, which advocated for a system like China has, where everyone is being watched all the time, and you got a social credit score, and you got to do certain things to keep that up, and you can't do other things, otherwise it'll go down, and you're constantly being watched. All your money is digital, that sort of thing, which ties in very nicely to the concept of a one world religion that Project Bluebeam is allegedly, being held on to in order to enforce that at some point. Now, of course, I'm inclined to believe at least part of this. Now, I don't know what to think about some of his writings on secret societies. As you know, how am I supposed to know some of that stuff? I just don't. But I do absolutely believe that he got whacked. He had apparently died of a heart attack at the age of 51, and that was in the 90s. Shortly after he leaked these documents, which is interesting timing nonetheless, and well after the invention of, now the CIA has fully admitted to having this, a heart attack gun. That is right, a gun that shoots you with radiation, so you have a heart attack, and it is completely untraceable. You can actually look this up, the CIA heart attack gun. It is a real thing. It is a modified, I think, MK47, or MR, I think it's some, they modified some gun to do that. It's fascinating and crazy that they admitted to it, which I wouldn't be surprised if that's how this guy really died. There's also some suspected predictive programming to go along with Project Bluebeam as well. It has similarities to the plots of Gene Roddenberry's unreleased 1975 Star Trek movie treatment, The God Thing, and the 1991 Star Trek The Next Generation episode, Devil's Due, which is fascinating. Predictive programming is all about getting people ready for a certain event mentally, and so they can accept that it's going to happen, and they don't completely go off the rails. But also, so they could also it works in the intermediary, saying that would never happen. I saw that on Star Trek. Star Trek is fiction, so this has to be fiction. That sort of thing. So the craziest part about all of this that I think of, because remember, these are all psyops, these are all psychological operations kind of meant to just confuse you sometimes. What if these documents being made available to the public from the beginning was a psyop? What if leaking Bluebeam and the Toronto Protocol are setups to have these theories completely discredited in the future, so maybe a one world entity can be brought in a different fashion, and so all the people who stake their claim with Bluebeam and say, hey, this is absolutely going to happen, if it doesn't happen and this government is brought in a different way, it sort of flies under their radar, and as they're completely let down by reality, they're volatile in their belief system, which means they're easier to sway one way or the other. I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking this. Maybe the government would never do this to their own people, and I should stop thinking about these things. If I die of a heart attack, no, I didn't. There is so much to talk about with Bluebeam, but I think this is where I will start to wind down. That is kind of a scary thing to think about, and there are plenty of places where you can find more information on it. There's no way I was going to be able to fit everything about just even modern psyops and Project Bluebeam in there. But now if you see a meme saying, like, what's the one King of the Hill meme where it's like e-girls are are a government psyop or something along those lines, or the guy that's like, I don't care who the FBI sends, I'm not paying taxes. Now you understand kind of the background of that and different psychological operations. Maybe them being a meme is even a psyop in and of itself. They're like, hey, if we can make this a meme, people won't think it's actually real, and they'll just think, oh, weird conspiracy theory people are becoming jokes in the mainstream again. We shouldn't believe that. Again, maybe I'm onto something. Maybe I'm just sniffing glue. I don't know. Just in general, psyops are giant mind pretzel that are meant to do just that, confuse you. And that is really why they are so hard to notice. I think it's kind of funny. Thinking back on where I started with this, it kind of went from fake vampire to beat the Filipinos to demonic, enigmatic secret societies are going to fake the second coming, and there is nothing we can do about it. But that's just on par for the podcast. I hope you enjoyed. If you didn't, then stop lying. And if you really didn't, then go listen to 20 hours of swarming bees and then come back to listening to it. I promise it will be much more enjoyable. Remember to like this video, subscribe, follow my Instagram at negativespace.pod, and then be on the lookout for more episodes about just crazy topics that I have no qualifications to be talking about other than just being a dude on the internet with a microphone and a laptop. For the next one, I'm trying to decide between giants or aliens as like another big one topic episode, kind of like this one was. But I don't quite know yet. I think both can just as easily tie into this episode. Like there are different psyops with the giants, like Smithsonian suppression and evolution being involved in that and muddying the waters with that. And then aliens, that in itself, I think, is one big psyop with like the events at Roswell. Like what is time compression? What is time compression, U.S. Air Force? What do you mean, time compression? That is not a thing. People just don't get compressed within time and see things in a different year. That doesn't work. Anyway, maybe that's a sign that I should talk about aliens next and the events at Roswell, because that is just one unhinged mess that I think very easily plays into Project Bluebeam, world government unity, that sort of thing, alien religions. So yeah, maybe that'll be the next episode. See, it's so hard to fit some things into this episode specifically, because it's almost like a trifold Venn diagram with aliens, giants, and psyops, because they overlap so much. But I think this was kind of like the good base level, so we know what a psyop is, and if I reference that in an alien or a giant video or episode, I guess they're technically videos, but I'm not on camera, whatever, who cares. If I reference that, like we're all kind of on the same page about what it means. But anyway, I think that's it. I kind of gave this episode a long, drawn-out Midwestern goodbye. Yeah, that should be it for now. Stay off of dating apps. They are crusty, and just psyops in themselves. Go to Aldi, get their sparkling water brand. I like it. That's good. That's lemon. The grapefruit one is also really good. So is the blackberry. They unfortunately do get kind of flat easily, but other than that, they're pretty good. All right, that's it. This should be up Sunday morning, I think, but whatever. If it's not, oh well. That's it. I love you. Goodbye.